Before you watch any further, there are spoilers for the first 2 books in A Court of Thorns and Roses, so click away if you haven't read those books. If you're still here, you probably love these books as much as I do. So hi, welcome. One of my favorite parts of the ACOTAR series is how art reveals Feyre's inner world and well-being before she can even articulate it herself. When she feels safe and free, she sees the world in color and shapes and light and composition. When she's traumatized, trapped, or emotionally cut off, she no longer sees the world through the lens of a painter. She's no longer responsive to beauty. At the beginning, art is tied to Feyre's identity. When Feyre still lived at the cottage with her family, when she still felt a sense of safety, belonging, and relative normalcy, she painted bits of furniture and wood around the cottage. She added color and life and hope and beauty to their otherwise impoverished existence. At one point, Nesta mocks one of her paintings. She sneered at the pillar of foxglove I'd painted along the edge of the table. The color's too dark, too blue, with none of the white freckling inside the trumpets. But I'd made do, even if it had killed me not to have white paint, to make something so flawed and lasting. Before Feyre ever gets to Prythian, art represents something essential in her. It isn't just a hobby, it's woven into the way she sees the world and how she expresses herself. In this quote, we see how vulnerable it is for her to have her art seen, and by extension to have herself seen, only to have it dismissed so cruelly. But we also see that painting feels necessary to her. She has to create, even if she has to make do with limited supplies. And even if what she makes ends up being permanently flawed. Art is how she experiences existence itself. When she first sees the gallery in the Springcourt Manor, she is overcome with awe. She describes it like this: such different views and snippets and angles of the world, portraits, still lifes, each a story and an experience. Each a voice shouting or whispering or singing about what that moment, that feeling had been like. Each a cry into the void of time that they had been there, had existed. This is one of the clearest articulations of what art means to Feyre. She doesn't experience paintings as a decoration. She experiences them as evidence of consciousness and humanity, or whatever the Fey equivalent of that is. Art is the language she uses for inner life. When she feels safe, she paints. The firelight danced on his mask, warming the gold, setting the emeralds glinting. Such color and variation, colors I didn't know the names of, colors I wanted to catalog and weave together, colors I had no reason not to explore now. Once Feyre feels safe at the Springcourt, and once she knows that her family is safe and cared for, she decides that she'd like to spend her time painting and requests art supplies. Tamlin gives her everything she needs and sets her up in her own studio. And in this studio, weeks disappear. She paints and she paints and she paints. However, when Tamlin's away dealing with threats to the Springcourt and she fears for his safety, she's unable to fully concentrate on the work. She's unable to really paint in the way she was painting before. Even this early in the story, art is tied to whether Feyre feels safe and settled enough to create. Art tracks her nervous system more accurately than her dialogue. Art keeps Feyre alive. Under the mountain, Feyre hears faint music coming from a vent in the corner of the ceiling in her cell. The melody is so beautiful that it pulls her from the depths of her despair. But she doesn't just hear it. When I closed my eyes, I could hear it more clearly. I could see it, as if it were a grand painting, a living mural. And then later, the music built a path, an ascent founded upon archways of color. I followed it, walking out of that cell. She says, "This wasn't music to dance to. It was music to worship, music to fill in the gaps of my soul, to bring me to a place where there was no pain." Music becomes a substitute for painting, and it's this force that pulls her out of the darkness of that cell. It becomes her lifeline. It allows her to imagine something beyond her suffering. In her darkest moments, the music is the reason, or it reminds her of the reason that she chooses to keep struggling, to keep fighting, to keep living. Trauma shows up first as the loss of artistic perception. After the ordeal under the mountain, Rhys summons Feyre to a balcony that juts out of the side of the mountain to say goodbye to her. The view is beautiful and such a contrast to the darkness that she had been subjected to for the past month. But as she takes in the view, she thinks the mountains went on, gleaming and shadowed and vast under the open clear sky. But nothing in me stirred. Nothing cataloged the lights and colors. She still sees the beauty, but nothing in her responds. And for Feyre, that artistic response to the world, that instinct to interpret her experience and the world around her by imagining how she would paint it, is essential to who she is. Or was. So when that response disappears, the book is showing us just how traumatized she is. It's evidence that part of her really has died. Sometime after they return to the Springcourt Manor, Tamlin gives her a new painting set, and she's filled with dread. The red paint reminds her of blood. The blue reminds her of the eyes of the fairy that she had to kill, and she can't bear to even step foot in her old studio. This place she couldn't tear herself away from previously. She recoils from the idea of painting. She recoils from that version of herself. The return of her artistic vision marks the beginning of her healing. A really important moment is when Feyre is watching Rhys and Asriel spar, and she imagines the painting she would make. She calls it Death on Swift Wings. The title came out of nowhere, and for a moment I saw the painting I'd create. The darkness of those wings, faintly illuminated with lines of red and gold by the radiant winter sun, the glare off their blades, the harshness of the tattoos against the beauty of their faces. This is the first moment she begins framing the world around her as a painting again. It's not that she's fully healed, but some essential part of herself has woken back up, and she's ready to start processing that trauma. Just a few minutes later, she acknowledges it out loud for the first time that she killed those fairies, and that she did it for a love that she had to leave behind. And then she fully breaks down. Feyre paints again when she comes home to herself. After learning the truth about Rhys and the bond, Feyre retreats to the cabin for some space and privacy so she can come to terms with it. When she comes across the paints in the storeroom, something in her wakes up, and she begins painting voraciously. She paints every surface of the cabin. Illyrian wings, Mor's hair, Amren's eyes. She fills the space with symbols of the people who have come to mean so much to her. This feels like a homecoming moment for Feyre. She's painting again because she's come back to herself. She has found a family she belongs to and a person she belongs with. When she covers the cabin in paintings, it isn't just creativity returning. It's selfhood, love, belonging, all coming back. Art helps Feyre imagine a future. At the cabin, she imagines herself opening a shop in Valeris to teach art to people working through their own trauma. Art is the way that she imagines a future for herself. Imagining and hoping for this future feels like the final threshold that she has to cross to finally come out from under the mountain. I just love how art is used as this additional narrator for Feyre's inner world. When she can see the world as a painter again, we know something in her is healing. When she can't, we know something is wrong long before she fully says it out loud. Through art, the books let us watch Feyre disappear and then come back to herself. I'm curious to hear other people's interpretations on this. Clearly, I have no one to talk to about it. While you're here, please like and subscribe. And if you liked this video, you'll probably like the one where I assign each of the main characters in ACOTAR a Jungian personality archetype. I'll link it above. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.